in spending time with him, we learn how to cooperate with him every day in whatever he has for us for that day, right? And then we just walk it out with him. And so he's the victor. We're not victims in the situation. Like, we have all of his power. We are the authority, in the day. And so, not to say, obviously things happen that are negative, but it's like, but how do you react to that? How do you respond to that? And so, are you going to be a victim of that? Or are you going to just be like, you know what? God's got this. It's fine. Everything's okay.
All right, welcome back to Foothill Studio Conversation. I have no idea what episode this is, but for the first time, I randomly thought to reach out to someone and say, what would you like to talk about? And they said, how about burnout? And I was like, I should ask people more often because that's a good suggestion. So we're going to talk about burnout today and maybe some solutions of burnout. We'll talk about boundaries, self-care, all that kind of stuff. So,
which is supposedly Debbie's favorite subject of all time.
Totally favorite. So with me is Mark and Debbie. They're awesome.
Also,
and
today's episode is brought to you by Matt's Candy. It's Matt's Candy, and it's just up for grabs.
Nerds.
Is that generic nerds or just nerds?
No, these are gotta have grape nerds.
Is there a such thing as generic nerds?
There probably is, as there is generic for everything. No?
No,
We're already getting off subject.
Yeah. Okay.
That was impressive.
Nerds. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, so when I think of the idea of burnout, typically I think of, and this could backfire on me totally depending on how healthy you are. When someone comes up to you and says, how are you doing? What's the first thing you think of?
Great.
How are you doing? Generally speaking, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
See, in my brain, I'm like, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I have 20 things going on.
Well, I think there's a lot of all of that then. Yeah.
So, well, that's what I'm talking about. Like my first thought, not necessarily like dwelling on it and woe is me, but like the first thing I want to say almost all the time is busy. Almost all the time. Because my life is busy. Now, what I say, depending on my relationship with that person, could be different than what I think.
Right.
Or it'll be like, well, I'm super busy, but hey, overall I'm doing great.
Yeah.
I mean, and I feel like most people are there, but again, you guys just said great, so I guess I'm the unhealthy one out of the two.
I was thinking great just because.
That's the normal response.
Well, and I don't want to be a downer for everyone. Oh, I'm.
You would literally be Debbie Downer.
Yeah.
Woo!
I've never heard that before. Ever.
I've never thought that before, and that was so exciting. You heard it first, folks.
Oh, shoot. That's good. Oh, Bryce. So when I've been reading a lot of different books right now about mindset. And so to me, it's like, if I dwell on all of the negative, then it gets worse. It blows up. It gets bigger. So saying great is like, I'm going to choose great. I'm going to have a great day. I can make it what I want it to be, I guess. That's my mindset in that. And saying great, like, and not, I don't know. Because I guess you can always be like, I feel like a lot of people just go to the negative. They just think, first of all, the negative things when someone's asking how you're doing instead of, how about we just...
Such as negative Bryce.
How about let's just talk about all, like, what is, I don't know, all the good things, like, or all the positive things happening and everything great.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
Well, yeah, it makes sense in a sort of the filter that you see the world with and the filter that you're going to see your day with.
Yes.
Where,
exactly.
And it's kind of I think there's more to it, but the principle on waking up in the morning and centering your mind on God and praying and reading your Bible, like it's giving you vision to see the day through that lens rather than choosing waking up and I'm all grumpy and I'm just going to roll out of bed and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I totally get that.
Yeah, I think we do that a lot. I mean, when it comes to anything, like, I deal with this with my kids a lot. People are like, oh, your kids are so great. They're so perfect. And I want to be like, well, you should hear this story. You know, and in reality, I'm like, my kids are great. I love my girls. They're amazing. But it's so easy to like want to temper that.
Right.
For
Let me tell you
whatever
how
reason.
bad things really are.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's another part of maybe people in general, maybe Christians, whatever, where we put a false face forward a lot of times where in our mind we're like, ah! And outside we're like, everything's cool, man. It's good. Our marriage is great.
I got
You
it.
know, like, so part of the part of me that wants to be really authentic will often be like, well, you see everything great, but there's actually this going on. And so I debate whether or not that's like good or healthy. It just depends on who I'm talking to, I guess. Like
Yeah, that does depend.
what the context is. Okay, so we'll be talking about a few different things. Maybe we should start off with some loose definitions. What would you say is self-care, Mark?
Well, it's easy to fall into the self-care is rest and relaxation part of it, but I don't necessarily think that it totally encompasses it, because self-care is also working out. Self-care is also the discipline in taking care of yourself, maintaining a schedule, clean up your room, make your bed, things like that. Self-care is the focus on your needs, essentially, and needs sometimes take work and not just a pillow and lots of sleep.
Yeah.
Though that's also important, and we can lose that one too.
Right.
That's kind of my view.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's great. I mean, it reminds me of, I think of it, responsibilities. Yeah.
What do you think our cultural perception of self-care is? Because I would say that's a pretty
I
healthy
feel like
perception of
it
self-care.
could get so overkill, you know, because I don't know, we live in a country that's so affluent overall, you know, and so it's kind of like we have so much comfort already, and so it's kind of like extreme comfort. So anytime there's any kind of negative feeling or emotion, I need to comfort that, and so it turns into, I had a really, a bad day because, I don't know, like some of the excuses are so kind of mild.
Because my husband's a dullard.
No, I mean, there's there's bad marriage stuff.
Well,
I mean, that's
sure.
hard stuff. I mean, but, I'm just talking about stuff that's really not that hard or of a day. It's like everybody has a different capacity, I guess. But big picture, I just feel like there's so much more that we could handle if we just managed our lives with better priorities, better boundaries and responsibilities. So I feel like a lot of it is just kind of putting out, we're self-care, doing the self-care to comfort ourselves instead of just actually really caring. It's
Yeah.
more comforting than caring.
It can be taken to a level where it's like, avoid any circumstance that gives you any negative feelings.
Right.
Never
right,
tell
right.
yourself something negative about yourself. Like, maybe there are things you need to work on and there are things you need to push through, but it could be taken to the place where it's like, you're perfect exactly how you are. You don't need to eat better. You don't need to exercise. You don't need to.
You
So-
be you.
Yeah, yeah. It can get to the kind of you be you thing,
In a
which
toxic way sometimes.
right, and there is something to the I am me and I'm gonna whatever, but we don't always know what's best for ourselves. Like we're kind of idiots sometimes.
That's true.
Speaking, that's just my opinion.
I'll take that one. No, I own that.
Okay, Debbie. So
Ditto.
you like boundaries? What are boundaries?
You know what? I like them so much because I failed so terribly at them.
Oh,
Great.
So I failed so terribly, like, as I was raising my kids. I mean, like, really bad. It's kind of a very sad story. And so I don't know if this is a place to share
Yep.
that stuff.
if only if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to the point of, like, trying so hard to be good enough and be a good mom and be a good wife and I'm the first generation like Christian family, my husband and I doing this Christian thing, so trying to make everything look like we are doing it right, whatever that looks like, so there was a lot of copying other moms and trying to figure out what are they doing, well, maybe I should try that, maybe I should try that, and never really knowing who am I? What do I want to do? What do I want it to look like? I don't know. I was just like not knowing. So I felt like I was scrambling around saying yes to everything. My kids were like 7, 5, 3, and 1, and like all like it was chaos. And so it got so bad where my brain was so scrambled that I had left Cole in the car. And like you hear of these stories of people leaving their children in their car, like who would do that? Like you've lost your mind if you did that. So I did it. And so it was luckily it was only 15 minutes and it was 100 degrees, so that could kill someone. So we got him out and he was fine because obviously he's alive.
Praise
But
God.
that was like
Just got married
no, that was
a year
James.
ago.
Yeah, a year ago. Almost. Yeah, so that was like a big, huge thing in my face. Like, Debbie, you need to work on this issue. So it was like, oh my gosh, I got to figure out why we got to this point. Like, and it was no boundaries. It was so much trying to please everyone and trying to figure out, trying to make everything look perfect, and it just wasn't. And so, basics like let's feed the child and let's keep the kids alive today. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Like, let's just keep things, I quit everything.
Yeah.
And so it was like, because I failed so bad in the boundary area, then I had to, I feel like I read the book Boundaries like 5 times just to be like, I need to know how to manage my life in a way. And it just changed everything, and more than just my schedule, but just emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, mainly mentally too. So all of that became such a big, and now I'm just such a like a big, huge propagander of boundaries.
Proponent.
There we go.
But you can
Thank you.
propagandize boundaries. That's fine.
I could propagander it.
Speaking of which, that's a Townsend and Cloud book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pick it up.
Townsend and Cloud, so
Yeah.
good. Yes, so good. So yeah. So boundaries and taking responsibility. So it wasn't my responsibility to take care of all these other things, and anyway, that goes into a lot of deeper things. But that's why boundaries
Yeah.
is huge.
I mean, so ultimately, like, you came to a place of burnout.
Totally.
Where you were just so
out.
just
Like it was nervous breakdown,
Right.
burnout. Like it was medication and therapy breakdown,
right, and
which
so
is very helpful, by the way.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yes.
So
I bet.
Proponent for therapy.
Yeah,
huge proponent for therapy.
let's do it.
So ultimately, boundaries were
Together.
kind of your way out, your way through that.
Totally.
Yeah, and so if we could like loosely define burnout, I mean, I think you visually described burnout, but if we could just like define it, I mean, it is just complete exhaustion from overwork that stops you from being able to do even some of the most basic parts of your life, whether it's work or family or
And
whatever.
really, where you can't even think straight anymore. Have you
Yeah.
got to that place ever? Where you just can't think, right? You can't like concentrate or.
Yeah.
And I feel like depression kind of I don't know, burnout and kind of depression kind of.
I think
feel
one
like that kind of goes.
starts the train on the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the first time I like really noticed it, I guess, was when I worked at my old church, which great church. I love Cordova Neighborhood Church. My brother's the lead pastor there. Super proud of him. But when I worked there, I was officially the youth pastor, unofficially the worship pastor and the media director. And it's a small church, and
Right.
so a lot of times staff just kind of has to pick up and
Right,
fill
right.
in the loose spots. And my goodness, like I got used to running at such a high level all the time that once I put in my 3 months there or whatever, and I started working only here full time, I was so confused by like what I was feeling because I wasn't stressed. Like, and I had
Like you
just
got
I had just been
'Cause
living.
there is an actual physical
Yeah.
adrenaline
Yeah.
that you didn't have running through you as much anymore.
Or I just had it running all the time.
So it was Right, right.
normalized.
And so I didn't know what calm was.
Right,
I didn't know
right.
what rest was. I was just so
Crazy.
like running constantly. And
Yeah.
and
Wow.
so when I started coming here, Dan actually told me I couldn't do anything aside from work when I worked here. I couldn't volunteer. I couldn't do any of that stuff because he was like, "You're burned up, man. Like, don't get involved." And so I could have done something, but I was like, "That's probably wise," and so I just didn't. And then after about a year, I started helping out at Renew, just doing worship on occasion or whatever. And now I do more because
Dan gave a degree, and we were like, we don't care. We want Bryce.
yeah. Well, but after a year, like I was like, no, like I'm in a better place
Right.
and all that. So, but I had to have someone else at that point set a boundary for me, and I had to respond to it. And luckily, I would say for myself and for my marriage and all of that, it worked out.
Yeah,
it's a
and it's
huge mercy.
better for, I mean, because you don't want a tragedy to set a boundary for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if it comes to that, you know, if it gets bad enough.
Very true.
Right. Gosh, what's the scripture? I mean, I forget
Let's Google it.
the reference, but it's basically God did not give you a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and sound mind. So, like, when you think of setting boundaries in times of burnout, you don't want to set that boundary out of a place of fear, out of a place of all this kind of stuff. You want to set it from a place that God's in control and from a godly wisdom and all of that kind of stuff. I would say. Would you disagree? I mean, maybe fear can be a switch.
Go, Mark.
I would even argue that boundaries is a act of self-worth,
Totally.
of taking up the identity that you've been given, the personhood that you've been given. God created you to take care of yourself and to not be walked all over, because the less boundaries there are, the more people not even like meaning to do bad.
Right.
Just because you're always open, they're
Right.
like, well, I'll
They'll
show
take
up.
advantage of that.
Exactly. And then you're sucked dry completely rather than knowing this is my line.
Yep.
I'm worthy
gotta
of
have
this
that.
line. Like I deserve to have
And you're
these built up.
responsible for that.
Exactly.
Line.
No
For
one
what's
else is
inside that
responsible.
line, that's your responsibility. You're going to be held accountable for that.
Absolutely. And,
to that
and
point.
I mean, I believe in, and this is a quote off of some Navy SEALs and a book that they wrote, but taking extreme responsibility for your own life and your own actions.
Exactly.
Because the more that you do that, the more you actually are realistic with yourself and what you can do, and are then more likely to be able to push yourself to be able to do the great things that maybe that's what's fueling why you have no boundaries, because you do want to just do everything. But you have to start with a base and build up from there to be able to reach those things and
Right.
properly navigate, okay, can I actually handle doing everything, or do I
Right.
separate stuff?
Right.
And I would even say, going further, that's when you truly begin to love people and show up for people, is when you know yourself, you've protected yourself, you have this boundary, and now I get to show up healthily into a
Right.
situation
Right.
to actually do some
You
good
have
there.
that, and then you have the capacity to be able to be present.
Yeah.
That's
Because outside of that, like you said, I totally relate to what you're talking about, by the way.
You're
the-
nothing. You're spent.
Exactly.
You're
But
a
like
hot
the whole
mess.
the whole people pleasing element to all of that, like very much relate. Whereas I feel like, at least in my circumstance, that when people pleasing comes in, it's still about me. So I'm not
Oh,
actually
totally.
showing up in love for people.
Totally.
I'm showing up
No.
to fulfill
Right.
something inside
Right.
myself.
So yeah, because
that-
putting up a boundary is uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Because it makes other people like, wait a minute. You know, you
I
have to
can't-
kind of push against something a little bit.
Exactly.
And especially if you've let people in like too far into your boundary, trying to get them back off, take some words and behavior to teach them like, hey, this used to happen this way, but now we're kind of changing things a little bit. And it's uncomfortable
Yeah.
for both, but long term, yeah, it definitely makes you
And in emergencies when
Stronger.
they come up, you won't be trampled up, or you'll be able to handle that.
yeah,
Flying in
It's
an
true.
airplane, the thing that they tell you with the air mask is
put your own mask on.
put your own mask, air mask on first. Doesn't matter if it's a kid or
Good.
not.
That's
Do
good.
it for yourself, and then you'll be able to
Right.
help
Help
those
other
around
people.
you. Yeah.
Exactly. Bingo. What he said.
Nailed it. So, I mean, this might be self-evident, but what would you say is the danger of burnout, as far as for yourself, for your community, all of that kind of stuff? What,
It's the danger of burnout.
yeah. I mean, how does it affect you and others around you?
Well,
Very negative.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
bad.
just
Very
not great
bad.
at all.
So bad.
I would say, one, it keeps you from the call that God has placed on your life. To be able to serve people well, of course. Like, that's just the natural, like, I won't be able to do things because I'm spent. It takes away from your, maybe not identity, but your own personhood. Like what we were just saying of, it's setting boundaries and respecting yourself, and that God created you and loves you and sees value in you. And when you don't respect that, it's, you know, it's not what God intended at that point. So you lose yourself essentially without boundaries.
Right.
Both not being able to show up for people and yourself until.
Well, then if you're not good for yourself, how can you be like there for your wife and your kids? And
Exactly.
I mean, if you're just burnt out, it's just it's almost like sickness. It's almost like you're very, very sick. You know, like you have nothing to give. But I mean, mine almost led to, like, it was so deep. Like the depression got so deep, it was like almost suicidal. So it was like to the point where, like, I can't do life. Like, I must be such a failure, you know, so I'm not good enough for my kids. Like, my kids should have a better parent. You know, it's like it starts this whole really unhealthy, bad. So burnout can lead to some really dark places.
Right.
So it's...
Yeah, I mean, you see some of these stories, sorry to interrupt, you see some of these stories of, like, parents who do terrible things to their kids that just end in utter tragedy, and you're like, that is the worst thing I could ever imagine. Like, these are evil, horrible people. And maybe in some cases that's true. Maybe in some cases it's severe burnout and depression that was never dealt with.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah, and everyone's going to respond to burnout differently. I run. I just disappear. In fact, I interned and had some severe burnout in there, and just no one saw me for 2 weeks. I was just gone, and that. But there's others who will be
Isolate. Yeah, there's just
aggressive
different ways.
about it. Yeah.
different ways to deal with it.
And I mean, especially so within the church, it's kind of funny because the church overall, you know, there's staff at a church, but it's kind of a volunteer organization to a degree.
Yeah.
And there is, at least in general, not specifically speaking Foothills Church, but in general, there is a stereotype that the church kind of bleeds volunteers dry. Like, as much as a volunteer will allow themselves to serve, a church will take it. And so do you think that within Christians, when it comes to service in the church, that a fair amount of people tend to get burned out because they feel like they're like, well, I have to do, you know, we ask for volunteers all the time, like, well, I have to do this. I have
It's
to
a noble cause.
Yeah,
It's
where's that line between we need youth ministry staff to love on kids and to build relationships and share the gospel, and this is so good and so necessary. But I have a wife and 5 kids and 2 jobs and whatever. Like, do you think that's prevalent within the church? Am I am I exaggerating that? I'm just kind of...
I don't know. I feel like there's people that are, the people that are the busy people are the people that end up being the volunteers. The people that are active in their lives and want to be helping tend to be the ones that volunteer, so they end up with even more. I don't know, but sometimes they know how to manage that, so it's kind of like they're responsible for saying yes or no in those ways. But there's a lot of people that have a lot of time on their hands and that are either just too afraid to put themselves out there, because sometimes people think they need to know the whole Bible and where everything's located to be able to show up and volunteer with any kind of ministries, and it's so not the case. Like, just be a body and be part and love and learn and be part of the family. So it's like, I feel like there's a lot of people that have time, but don't understand the urgency and the call of what is, you know, the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. So there's a lot of, I don't know if it's fear or just selfishness. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot, I don't know.
apathy.
Yeah, apathy, that's good.
Interestingly enough, what you were talking about, those who do show up and they typically are the busiest, but they're managing their schedules. I mean, there's two people who show up like that, where either they're the ones who are going to burn out in 3 months, because we work with volunteers, we see this all the time.
Right.
They're either going to burn out in 3 months, or they're the ones who are there for life.
Right.
And I think, from what I was saying earlier, that the extreme ownership
So
sort of concept,
individual.
like, they've taken control of their own life. They have the understanding that they are their own person. They are the only one in control of their own person.
Right.
And therefore, they will manage their
Right.
schedules and
Right.
be able to show up for that
Right.
because it's an important
Right.
thing.
But obviously, if you have a volunteer that's showing up as complaining and is like spun out and starting to like show signs of dangerous symptoms, then I would hope that there'd be a leader that would
Sure.
look at them
Yeah.
and say,
Yeah.
maybe you should take a break for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
And leaders who care about burnout and are aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, we all need health checks. When I did youth ministry, like some of my youth staff would be like, "It's finals week," and I'm just like tapped, and I was just like, "I can't," and I'd be like, "That's okay. Like, take a week, take 2 weeks. Like, it's fine. It'll go." Like,
Right.
because it is important as a leader to guard yourself and your staff.
But individuals just need to make choices themselves. Like,
Sure.
It's true.
if you're asking for volunteers, you can't like interview all of them and be like, "So, are you sure you can do this?"
Right.
You know, it's
Right.
kind of like
A lot of them don't know. They're like, maybe not. Like, I have a heart to,
Right,
but I've never
right.
done this, so I don't know.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the, I mean, you were mentioning it. One of the most freeing things for me has been one of the most constricting things. It's one, having an 8 to 4 job. Two, having a calendar that I put all the stuff I'm doing on. Like, the majority of me hates that. Because it is.
Oh, that's so funny.
Because it's that feeling that every moment of my life is scheduled, and there just is no free time anymore. Which I have kids, so there kind of is no free time anymore.
Yeah.
But the reality is, when I stop looking at it as like this just negative force in my life, it actually brings me a lot of freedom, because I know when I'm busy and I know when I'm not. And so I can say, someone asks me, "Hey, can you do this for me?" I can be like, "Yeah, I can." Like, that'd be great. Let me put that on my calendar. Boom. It's not one thing that just happens all the time when I talk to young adults. Sorry, guys. Is I'm like, "Hey, do you want to go to a movie?" This happens with Mark too, so I'll throw him under the bus too. "Hey, do you want to go to a movie tonight?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know. I'll check. I'll let you know." I'm like, "It's 4:00. It's tonight. What do you want?" And he's like, "I'll let you know."
If a
I'll let
better
you know what
option-
this is.
If a better option comes up.
No, actually, it's not that. It's an energy check. It's as an introvert
Yes, that's
and
yeah,
a hard introvert, because you're also introverted to some degree, right?
Well, this
just hard to.
you're the healthy version of this, or you have other plans because you already have a calendar or whatever.
or plans that are tentative and may fall through.
Sure.
But nonetheless, it is. I would say it's very responsible of me. It's an energy check
He was
because
setting a boundary.
of knowing when
good.
I can and can't handle things, and
Yeah.
sometimes I just can't handle it.
Yeah.
The schedule's open, but it's
no,
not going to
but I'm
happen.
going
Right,
home.
and see that,
I'm okay
but
with that,
self-care.
and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
but that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, your schedule,
that. I
know
love
kind
that.
of where you're at, and so I say, "Do you want to hang out?" And you say, "Well, no, I can't." And you ask if I want to hang out. "Oh no, I'm doing this thing with my family." Like, it somehow, the rigor of a schedule gives you freedom,
Yeah.
Totally.
which is annoying.
Intentionality.
Yeah, it's annoying, but good.
No, I don't think it's annoying. It's so good. You gotta have it. You gotta have all those disciplines.
Yeah.
It's a discipline. It's
But
like,
Debbie,
it's
I don't want
managing-
them.
But here's the deal: like, you're not single in like 15. You're not like you're kind of. It's called being a grown up.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
it's like, what is free time? That just means that you've set aside time just for yourself. Is that what you think free time is?
I
hasn't
mean,
been-
like
it hasn't
Wednesday
been
nights.
allotted to-
Wednesday nights are my free night because we have babysitting, and either Bethany and I can do something together, or we can do something separately.
Right. So it's more like entertainment time or something
Yeah,
like that.
just-
It's not task time.
Right.
Is that what you mean?
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's your free time.
Or a tentative time,
And
necessarily.
then weekends, they're not free time, but they're family time.
So I feel
which
like
is
there's a lot of
different
time
category
that's
for me.
so wasted when
Yes.
we just let it be open.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not, that time is all the only thing we can't get back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like, that's so important to
I'm going to
manage
invent a
it. You
time
got to
machine and
manage
prove
it.
you wrong.
You got to manage it, man.
Yeah.
So that's so good that you're doing a calendar and a schedule and time blocking.
I just have to remember to
I feel
check
like
it.
the time blocking, freedom.
Yeah.
Definitely freedom
Yeah.
in that.
Planned spontaneity is what my parents told me growing up. And I was like, that's not spontaneous.
That's right.
But it is.
And so ultimately, we still find ourselves in times when, let's say we've got the bare minimum of things we need to do, but we're still getting burnt out. For example, I mean, myself, during certain times of the year, I have 2 jobs, 2 kids, I volunteer in a ministry, sometimes I help out in worship. And so there's this weird, like, I'm doing everything that I need to be doing, and I can really closely teeter on burnout.
I need to interject really quick because you
Great.
are choosing that lifestyle.
Sure.
You're choosing 2 jobs.
I'm choosing
You
2 jobs,
you
hoping.
chose 2 kids. You chose all of that.
Sure.
So that's all of something that you can
Right.
you can remove one job and you can remove
can't remove
other
the
things.
kids.
You could remove
Can't
one
remove
kid.
the kids. No, keep those kids. But there's a lot of things that we act a
Right.
victim of.
Sure,
It's like,
but we're not.
but we choose it, right?
And that's kind of what I was getting
If I
at.
interrupted you.
Well,
No, you just nailed the question.
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. No, I mean,
that's a good thing. That's a good
Sorry
thing.
about that.
no, it's fine. And I have 2 jobs, hoping that it will turn into only one
Right,
job.
right, I
Like
understand
that's
that.
kind of the goal.
Ditto.
But ultimately, I feel like we often get to this place where we're doing everything that we think we can't get rid of. These are the most important things. Like I can't get rid of this, and we're willing to sacrifice our health at the altar of
Right. Oh,
There's
burnout.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yes,
is
great book.
life changing.
I've read the
Great
title.
book. It's amazing. Exactly. Listen to Mark, Bryce. Listen to Mark.
There's a habit in there against that, Bryce. One of the things that he talked about was he was teaching a class, and a student comes up to him and says, I will not be in your class tomorrow. I have to go to, I think, swim meet or some sort of athletic
I
thing
have
that
to
I
go
don't
to a
know
concert.
because I'm a
Right.
musician who knows nothing. Nothing of athleticism. Anyways, and so he's like, no, that's not what's happening. You are choosing to not be in my class because this is more important to you.
Right.
Right.
And it, like, through this whole thing, he finally got him to the point where he said, yes, I am choosing to go to this instead of your class, knowing that I will miss the material, but because I would, the consequences of what I'm choosing, I would rather have. And though we naturally function that way, our inability to admit to those
Right,
things and just
right.
say, this is what I'm choosing,
Right.
is what keeps us in chains. It's what keeps our minds not cognizant of our own schedules and lives and keeps us from being able to be in full control of our own actions and decisions.
Right.
It's a
right.
beautiful book, Bryce. You got to read
Working
it.
on- It's kind of like living on the offense instead of the defense. And so we tend to act like we're always on the defense, but like you're choosing those things. So yeah. So when I feel like, oh, I'm so tired because it's like, wait, I decided to do this, so that's I can't complain about it. No complaining allowed because you picked it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that also just kind of makes me think of the times that I and other people will be like, gosh, I'm so busy watching Netflix for 4 hours. I'm like, no good.
Stranger Things.
Everyone's busy.
It requires my attention.
Yeah.
It's true.
Can you think of any biblical examples where you could kind of put the title over it, avoidance of burnout? I mean, can you think of any like areas where it kind of covers that kind of boundary or whatever? Okay, Mark.
Jesus snuck away from the people all the
Oh
time.
yes, he did.
Look it up.
So good.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
He always went away. He got time for himself to be with God, just solitude. And oftentimes facing the biggest things that were coming.
Yeah.
He goes into the garden right before he's about to go through the crucifixion and all of that. Like, he took time aside, prayed with God, and then was taken away. I'd say that's ultimate.
Yeah, and I mean, often in those times he would pray, and then he got some form of like vision for what he needed to do next, because the disciples would be like, "Hey, come back! They want you to do this." He's like, "Nope, sorry, got to go this way." Yeah, I think that's a huge one. I was kind of looking this up. I do mild research. Moses, back in the day, leader of Israel or whatever, people came to him like, "She hit me. What do I do?" Blah blah blah, and he would like make judgments on the different situations according to God's law or whatever. But he was doing it for the entire nation of Israel.
Yeah.
And his father-in-law, Jethro, came to him and was like, "Bro," Bryce International version, "you cannot do this on your own. You got to get some help." And ultimately, he ended up delegating some of that responsibility to godly men within that circumstance. And so I think there's a huge piece within ministry, which is why we have volunteers and all that kind of stuff, that delegating to godly people can, delegating, depending on the circumstance, delegating responsibility to people can help spread it out over a wider area and get rid of burnout. The Bible says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden." I mean, there's an idea that God does not want us to sit in that burnout. He says, "I will give you rest." I mean, I think that's super important to hear and to acknowledge just those truths, that you need to retreat, you need to delegate, because God has something better for you. You look at Mary and Martha. Do you guys know Martha, Mary?
Who?
Okay.
What is she?
You know the story, right? I believe
One worked really hard, and one was chilling by Jesus.
Right.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
Was Martha the busy one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Martha's running around. She's doing all this stuff, all good stuff, not bad. She's making sure he's comfortable, bringing him food, doing all this kind of stuff.
Getting irritated.
Mary's just sitting
Mary's
there
not helping
and
her out at all.
just being a
Just
dullard,
lazy.
just so lazy. And then we have Jesus basically saying, like, Mary's chosen what's better. Like, and it reminded me of this song by Shane and Shane. It's like this old worship song with this line in it that said, "Lord, my serving you replaced me knowing you." And that always just like really hit me, because you can easily do tons of great, amazing things for the Lord, and you can even make a difference in people's lives for the Lord. And you could be an inch deep in your devotion and relationship with the Lord. 'Cause ultimately, you end up doing it out of this form of self-reliance. Like you got filled up at some point, and you just gave and gave and gave and gave, and it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And at some point, you're going to burn out because you've been doing it without filling up, without taking that retreat time that Jesus did. Is there any other kind of concepts in the Bible you think that speak? That
So
have
the Mary and Martha was about Martha being burned out.
Yeah. It was about serving to the neglect of the relationship, which
Gotcha.
leads to
I gotcha.
burnout if unchecked.
I'm following now. Sorry.
But maybe I just didn't explain that well, and
No,
I
no, no.
apologize.
It's okay. I'm just slow on the uptake. It's good.
So
That's
so in a personal way, how do you find that line between serving God and knowing God? Like what? Just practically, like what's your methodology? You wake up, you pray. What do you do that puts you in that place?
I'll go first. Oh, I don't know. I feel like it's always in communion, I guess you could say. So there's always a conversation going on internally with the Holy Spirit, I guess that would be, and just constant. There's different amazing apps. I have found some apps.
Do you know some names?
Yeah. Can I say names?
Sure.
Oh, yeah. So Eldridge has one that's called Pause. And so.
P-A-W-S?
P-U-S-E.
P-A-U-S-E. You never know.
Pause. Like puppies.
Us Christians
that,
love
not
our
like that.
acronyms. You never know.
Yeah, like to take a pause. And so they have a 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute. And then there's prompts. And then there's some little background music. And there's like some guided prayer. It's guided prayer. And so it kind of gives you guided prayer and then gives you space to talk to God. And then more guided prayer. And then space to, and just really small phrases, so prompts pretty much. So anyway, that's been a great tool, and actually set it in my schedule and my alarms to reminders of, at certain times of the day to just pause and to do that and be intentional, like about that relationship. And so there's reading I do at night before I go to bed. Morning time is I'm waking up. I can't even, God doesn't even know how to talk to me yet because I can't even think straight yet. He's like, I'll wait till she gets her coffee and then we'll have this conversation. So that's kind of how that goes.
It's a God who knows you.
Yes. He's like so patient with me. So, but I feel like with worship is always kind of something that is, I just love to always have worship music going because it puts me in, I feel like I'm at the throne room, right? And so I just get to be with him. And that's where I'm complete, I'm fulfilled. And so I'll do whatever I need to do throughout the day. I mean, there's still a busy day happening, but I try to always be like, he and I have this thing about nature and what he's created, and when the birds are flying across, or the sunsets, or the way the lighting is outside, or the way the colors are different in all the different seasons, and so I love noticing all of those things and delighting in those things, and so he brings those things, I feel like, to me more. If it's like, this could sound hokey pokey, but from butterflies to dragonflies to things that come right in front of me, like da da da, and then fly off, and I'm like, that was so sweet, thank you. It's like redirects my attention back to him, like all kinds of things like that. That I don't know. I just try to be attentive to him and how he's trying to talk to me and hear his voice and just be communing. And so, and that's all day long. There's not like. I don't make it rigid because then that becomes a scheduled thing and then it becomes very legalistic, and I just I don't feel authentic in that form of, even not to say that just setting aside an hour every morning would be amazing if my brain could do it. So I'm more of I could do that at night. If someone could set aside an hour of time and be like, I'm going to do this Bible study, and I mean that's awesome. We need to do that. But every day that's kind of my routine.
Nice. It's kind of the pray without ceasing mindset. Is the just always throughout your day in communion and keeping him in your thoughts and inviting him into that.
Right.
Yeah, I love it.
Help me! And yelling, help me! How about you?
So I am super ADD all the time.
So true.
And coffee only makes it worse. It just makes it faster, if anything.
Yes, no kidding.
So finding time, I've almost... I basically invite him into that, because what I would view as a deficiency or as an inability as something that keeps me from him has become if he's a God who's super resourceful, if he's a God who's super creative, then God, I invite you into my distraction and into because I'm a super internal processor. I'm always thinking through things and about things like that, and just be in that with me. Like, God, I want to hear you speak to these things, because my mind is just flying right now, but that's okay. You can handle those things.
Totally.
And I feel like he can speak into everything that's going on in our own minds and hearts. And eventually, when I can find the time to still my heart and mind, then there's a little bit more communion there. So it's kind of like making the best of a tough situation almost. Or, for example, if you're running late to work or something, and so you don't have that time in the morning that you usually get, well, you have a car ride.
Right.
You don't have to listen to music.
Right, totally.
You could listen to worship music and go that route, but there's just we always have the ability to commune with him in everything that we're doing, whether it be the very disciplined 15 minutes, 1 hour in the morning, or it's I'm a very distractible person, but that doesn't get in the way of what he can do with that.
Right.
You know?
He's there. He's in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's different as well, because I have a roommate who is very much likes to keep it on task,
Scheduled.
That time that he allots and gets on his knees and prays, it means everything, and it's not legalistic. It's actually tradition, and it's something that speaks. I know Doug is another traditional type person who it just speaks very deeply into him and into his relationship with God.
Right.
And so I think
awesome.
the element of knowing yourself also plays into your ability to find that way of communing with God and getting that time to be able to be with him as well.
Yeah. I think for me, the reason that lyric always stood out to me is because that seems to be my default. like serving God often to a degree replaces me taking the time to know him more.
That's I think that's easy to do, though.
It's
more
easy.
common than not.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And it's especially easy as someone who was in the ministry for a while, someone who went to school, learned theology. I'm like, I know God. I got this figured out. Like, I took a class on ecclesiology. I don't really know what that means, actually. But
I don't think that's a thing.
That's
it
not
is.
real.
I think it's like the study of the theology of the church or something like that.
Oh, okay. I thought it had a different name.
It probably does. Let us know.
Bryceology.
But ultimately, it's like I tend to give out of that ever decreasing cup a lot until I'm reminded, or or even sometimes out of obligation, like, oh man, I'm teaching tonight at young adults, I got to do some study, or whatever.
Great.
Because for me, I don't take the time often to read scripture. Sometimes I listen to worship music. Like, I always try to be I would say my most purposeful time with God has to do with my children. I try to, every night, even if they go to sleep when I'm not home, I come in and I pray with them or whatever. That's probably my most purposeful time every day. Aside from that, I try to be purposeful about praying when I witness things and I'm like, oh, there's an ambulance, let's pray and put those people before God and all that kind of stuff. But I do really struggle with this particular area, just trying to choose that over whatever else is going on, because I often convince myself that the other stuff going on is what I need to be doing. And so ultimately I'm kind of asking that question to see how you guys tackle that, not as someone who has just crushed it on that one.
I imagine this, and this is a huge generality, but I imagine this being a lot harder for extroverts because it's just a constant desire to be around people. That's where I'm going to get my energy and all. And so the discipline to separate yourself and spend time with God is probably a lot harder to do because it's not your natural way of getting filled up and getting excited. Even though you are spending time with a being, you know what I mean. As well as high achievers who their life is definitely set on pushing forward, getting all that kind of stuff. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to view taking that time away as accomplishing, even though it is it's the fuel, as you're saying, it's filling the cup. It's the fuel that gets you to wherever you're trying to go. You have to gas up your car all the time to be able to keep moving.
Once a week, it's so annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately, which is incredibly annoying, I I I just choose it. I choose it all the time. Like when I have my downtime, like tonight, Bethany's going to hang out with some friends, and she's gonna get some like good time with friends. I'll put the girls to bed at 8, and I have the choice to work, to watch TV, or to spend some time with God. And I think to a degree, because I've chose to pack my life with so much stuff. When I have that opportunity, I'm almost always going to choose the path of least resistance.
Comfort.
Yeah. I'm going to choose comfort because
The default.
I don't have super good boundaries. I have good boundaries in some ways and just terrible in other ways.
Well, or just it's just having a plan, like planning ahead or thinking ahead about that. Like,
Well, yeah, but
so how do I
hate
want to
doing
handle this evening?
Yeah.
Just being intentional.
Yeah.
It's all intentionality.
Yeah. So I mean, this is an area that I
And
don't
it's
do super
easy
well at.
to do, thinking that we're being, instead of being, we're doing. So I have struggled with that. Yeah, that is something in the past that I've struggled with as well. Like thinking just because, if I'm not doing this, this, and this, and this, I must not be, being good enough or whatever. But I'm learning to
Right.
let
And
that go.
And as an introvert, it's easy to just sit there and be alone, but not do that as well. Like it hits everybody to some degree or another. It's intentionality and
Yeah, I mean,
discipline.
as kind of a closing thought, I guess, and you can add to it or just tell me that I crushed it. Words of affirmation, guys. No, I'm just
you're a
kidding.
beautiful human being.
Amazing job.
It's super important to, as you said, acknowledge that you're choosing these things that cause you to burn out. Like, it's super important to choose that, or to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge that by doing so, you're not choosing God, who wants you to come to him with your burdens and relieve those burdens. Like, God does not want you to do that. I mean, the life of God, which is Romans 12:1, which is bodies as a living sacrifice. I mean, it's not like he's saying like, come and everything's easy, but he's like, it'll be difficult, but you are doing it with me. There are others to carry your burdens. There's all of these things. So he invites us into this challenging personal responsibility, all of this kind of stuff, but with the promise of joy and peace and all of this kind of stuff. And how that works, is it Philippians 2 that just talks about the peace that goes beyond understanding and all of that kind of stuff. Look it up, guys. Like that peace is everything around you is crashing, and here's peace. Like he just gives that to you through the power of his spirit and stuff. But you need to choose that. And that's ultimately what God wants for us. He doesn't want a bunch of worthless, burnt out people who have nothing to give anyone and can't bring people to him.
Right.
Maybe that sounds harsh, but I mean, he wants us to be able to have something to give, and we have an unending well that we can drink from to give. And
just to be clear, he also wants you to be well.
yeah,
Not just.
I thought I was saying that, like giving us peace.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I guess I wasn't hitting it hard
But I
enough.
feel like if we don't know what he's calling us to do or what the vision he has given us to be part of, or if we're going after something that's not even what we're supposed to be doing, it's kind of going to be painful.
Yeah.
So, in spending time with him, we learn how to cooperate with him every day in whatever he has for us for that day, right? And then we just walk it out with him. And so he's the victor. We're not victims in the situation. Like, we have all of his power. We are the authority, in the day. And so, not to say, obviously things happen that are negative, but it's like, but how do you react to that? How do you respond to that? And so, are you going to be a victim of that? Or are you going to just be like, you know what? God's got this. It's fine. Everything's okay. It's not like the roll over and die and act like the world's ending. it's like there's so much that he's called us to, to do with him. And so I think we make it so much more complicated than it needs to be. We make it way harder than it needs to be. It's not. It's simple. I mean, he's very simple, and so, I mean, it's like trusting him, just trust him in what he's put in front of you. And there's, like, as a parent and a father, as a husband, those are huge roles to have it focused, and as a provider, so that is a big responsibility to be taken care of. And so, you're doing it. You're killing it. Being a great dad and a great husband and providing, it's like you're doing it all. And so it's like you can just have peace in that. Like, I'm doing what I'm called to do. This is what God asked me to do for my family. And so there's, just you're doing it. So it's like the striving, we tend to strive, and have to try to be this better and better and better and better. It's like, just be good with, who you are in him. Obviously, we want to be better and growing and all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know, I think we make it harder than it needs to be sometimes.
For sure. Or we take on more than what
Way
we're
too
supposed to be
much.
chewing in the first place.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
But, and then if it feels so big, it's like, I feel like he gives us what we need to do more. If it feels like it's too much, it's like, and it's things that you can't control.
Yeah.
Like, let's say disease or something. I feel like he will empower us to walk it out with him. With him, right? Not by
Philippians
ourselves.
2. Whatever those verses are.
Nailed it, Debbie.
So cute. So cute.
You're so cute. Your
That's
terrible
so cute.
scripture memory.
That's so cute. Well, I'm not helping you out at all. So
Neither of us are saying
I'm
anything
like,
to
yeah,
it.
Philippians, sure, yeah, Philippians 2, go.
It's not just, I mean, there is a love of watching you flounder, but
That's fair.
Flip flop.
that was, you nailed that.
Yeah.
That was perfect.
I don't need to say anything else. I would just meander. Thank you for listening, guys, or watching if this video is actually recording. I'm not sure. We'll find out when I walk over there. But if you have any feedback, I mean, just some stories of burnout or overcoming burnout through boundaries and all that kind of stuff, feel free to email us, Mark, Debbie, or Bryce at foothillscp.org. Hit us up on Twitter. If you have some kind of topic you want us to flounder through, let us know.
Yeah.
We'll
And
do
hit
it.
that like button, smash that subscribe button, and leave a comment down below.
Smash it. Smash it.
Smashed.